This SoonerScoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. If you're ready to see the rest of the world just as clearly, get your fresh perspective at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop Lasix.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here on a Friday and another weekend to come. A big weekend at that. Obviously, a big win for Oklahoma women's basketball team on Thursday night, right? We talked about the men's basketball team and the road that they have here coming up over the last 3 games of the regular season. A game in Oxford on Saturday. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of basketball talk here as we have another Around the Corner, taking your questions from the Crimson Corner message board, the biggest, largest community online for Oklahoma fans, and coming to you here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel, taking all your questions and, I don't know, just like trying to talk it all out. It's easier to do this than sometimes put something back on the message boards for the Oklahoma fans. George, how are we? Welcome into the weekend, kind of.
Yeah, beautiful outside.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Hopefully
These are
a lot
the
of
days
people...
that we worked for, kind of.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a couple weeks ago, it was 2 degrees outside. So to have this weather is amazing. I'm sure we're going to still get a cold week here soon. But
spring ball starts. I told Peyton Bowen yesterday, he came and did some radio stuff over at What Oklahoma is like, yeah, it's really nice today, but by the time you guys hit the field, it's going to be shitty again.
Yeah, next Thursday.
It always is. And then it's windy and it's just miserable.
Right, like next Thursday when they start practice, it's going to be terrible. But it's kind of crazy that spring football's here next week. You got baseball going on this weekend, so hopefully a lot of people get out to Eldell. The weather, I mean, you got to get out to the baseball park this weekend. But
softball with Loves Field.
Softball.
It's the final weekend of non-conference play, as we talked about on the Stickball Report. Bob Prisbillo and I going over the softball and the baseball programs. Fantastic starts to the season. 14-0 over at Loves Field for the softball team. 8-0, the best, start for Oklahoma in, what would that be?
12 years.
2013.
Yep.
So it's everything's going well. Tyson Witherspoon back on the mound on Friday. It's almost becoming a little bit of can't miss. Like you have to check
watch
in just to see what he's up to. 21 strikeouts, 2 walks to start the season, 2-0 and just 12 innings of work. So, all right, you ready? Get into some of these questions. Obviously, Jim Nagy.
Big week this week.
And everything that went into the general manager hire. We talked about it on the Unofficial 40. We did the instant reaction here that you can watch on SoonerScoop.com's YouTube channel as well. But let's go ahead and jump into it here as the first question coming from the Crimson Corner message boards. Bob Stoops, Broken Pinky, great screen name. Going to be hard to find an issue with this hire. Tons of recent experience with the college and NFL landscape and NFL scouting work. Great hire. George, this was like the first time in a long time that I can remember anything happening within the OU athletic department that every person was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
What a great hire. This is positive.
Other than just, a couple miserable people, celebrated this hire. And that's what, we'll see what Jim Nagy does and what it looks like in this front office. And I'm excited to see who he ends up hiring to build out this front office. But boy, did the program just need kind of this shot in the arm of momentum, especially heading into spring football and obviously a pivotal offseason and 2025 football season to, get that. Like I said it on the podcast this week, but like, when's the last time OU football was talked about this positively for an entire day by the country like this? And that's what's crazy about it is it's not just, here in Norman or here in the state or even in just the college football world. Like you're talking about even in the NFL, OU was the talk of the town in a good way. Right. And that to me is like the optics of this thing are almost as important as what he's actually going to get done here as Oklahoma's GM.
OU's been on such the opposite end of the optics. I think most recently was.
We were talking about them needing to maybe let go or fire Joe Castiglione just a couple weeks ago. Who's been here, now 26 years or whatever.
And this one hire isn't going to just alleviate anything either. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people out there that will yell at the TV screen like he should not go without criticism, and rightfully so. I think we've been pretty upfront about that.
But this was also at the same time was a home run hire.
Sure.
This was a big time get for Joe Castiglione and Randall Stevenson, Jake Rosenberg, everybody that was involved in this. It was huge. So I think the fan base, rightfully so, should be happy about them getting Jim Nagy.
There was a really interesting article that Ari Wasserman actually wrote on on 3 that was kind of talking about the comparisons to this and what Ohio State did back in 2012. We'll get to a little bit more of that here in a second. Another follow-up, Josie to the haters. How you like them apples? Holy shit, this is a fantastic hire from the great Rimmicky81. Yeah, I mean, I think that this was one of those things. Like, you would really have to be dug in on one side of the fence for you not to at least go. And I think I tweeted this on Wednesday when the hire was made official, that it's like even the darkest OU football soul has to step away and go, okay, this is a good thing for the program in this new, precedent or the new world that they're moving into with the front office.
Definitely. And I don't think it fixes your issues for next year, right? Like next year, there's still, a lot of it's going to depend on John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle and, Brent calling the defense and Deion Burks being healthy, like all of those things, none of that changes with the Jim Nagy, but the direction of the program you feel pretty good about under Nagy's leadership, and as well as, Randall Stevenson and from my understanding, what he's done behind the scenes has been, phenomenal in a lot of ways in terms of figuring out the budget, getting ready for the revenue share if that were to happen. So, I think that you should be excited. Again, does it change the expectations for next year? No, I don't think so. But the long-term view of this thing, I think you certainly, should feel excited. And, like they said, I mean, look, there's been a lot of hate towards Joe C., the athletic department, Venables, all of that. But I definitely think Wednesday was a right day to celebrate them.
For the first time in a long time, hey, just celebrate something.
Yeah.
Just celebrate
Take a
something
win.
that was good. Take a win. It will be interesting. Jim Nagy, obviously, he's going to take over and then come in and almost kind of have to hit the ground running, right, with everything that's going on. The Future
Get the
Freaks
spring
coming
portal
in
a month and a half.
portal. Future Freaks coming up next weekend in Norman. So, and then obviously spring football, just in general, coming in and taking over and doing whatever they need to do with all the hires that are going to have to be made for the front office as well. So there has been a lot of questions just in terms of like what actually can Jim Nagy do versus what he's going to be responsible for. And we'll go to the question here from Dr. Mazza in a second. Nagy will lead OU's roster management, talent acquisition, including player recruitment, evaluation, retention, and compensation as part of his duties. He will also manage the impact of rules governing name, image, likeness, obviously NIL, the transfer portal process, revenue share allocation, scholarship limits, and eligibility requirements. So this is a general question that is out there when talking about Jim Nagy, all of his connections back into high school, as well as, more importantly, probably the college ranks. The NFL is obvious. Dumb question time. The GM can talk to recruits, be involved in the recruitment of players. Those are both questions.
Yep.
What are the answers to those, George?
Yes. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, he can definitely. I mean, look, I don't think he can be on the road and
that's
go
what I was going to bring that up. Like, I don't think that you're going to see him out there making house calls with Brent Venables, but
I think he can though, like call and DM players, I believe. I don't think there's any restrictions on that. I mean, you hear about GAs or analysts or whoever, talking to recruits. So I believe that he can contact them in that way. But also the bigger thing, like when these kids come on campus, they come for their official visits or they come for Future Freaks or whatever, he can certainly interact with them and recruit them and get to know them and their families. And I think that's going to be huge because he can, like, more than almost anybody, maybe anybody in the country can point and look and say, look at all the people I've put in the NFL. Like he can, I think, evaluate talent as well as anybody. And also he has the record to show for it. Like I think that his relationship and also being able to connect players with, future agents, NFL teams, all of that stuff, like his connections to me is going to make him an incredibly valuable recruiter.
And it was something that we had talked about, on the podcast this week in terms of you just look at the national attention like you had brought up of just everybody. You scroll through Twitter and it was basically a who's who of the football world, just the professional ranks and the college ranks of congratulations, what a hire.
Very well liked guy. Like based on social media, it seems like everybody loves this guy. And so that tells me, and you've seen him out in front in the media or on social media, whatever it is, like he's very personable. And I think when it comes to recruiting, that will obviously, be super helpful. And I've said it several times, but one of the things that I don't think we've talked enough about is his ability to market the Senior Bowl. It was super impressive the last 7 years. I can only imagine his ability to market Oklahoma football, which I understand hasn't been the best the last couple years, but the history and the tradition of all of it, I think he's going to be able to be an extremely good marketer of the program, whether that's with recruits or fans or whoever.
Well, and as you said, I think it was on Wednesday when we were talking through everything on the instant reaction with Josh McCuistion, just in terms of the hire itself, fantastic, but it was also, there was like a side set of it that was like, this is Oklahoma, kind of remembering that they're Oklahoma to a certain extent.
Yeah, and I mean, Jim Nagy even, tweeted, I think it was my tweet that, I said this signals that, what people think of Oklahoma football, and Jim Nagy was like, yes, it certainly does. Like that tells you what you need to know. I mean, Jim Nagy isn't just going to any program, right? Like he's going to go to a blue blood, a top program, a program that I would say, frankly, believes in, can win a national title, right? Like Jim Nagy's not just going to anybody. So, and I think it also says something about Brent Venables. And I know I've said on here about, and I can't remember if that's one of the questions coming up, but like the idea that, if Brent were to fail next year, obviously Jim Nagy would be very, involved in the process of hiring the next coach. But I also think Jim Nagy believes in Brent Venables. If he didn't, I don't know if he would take this job.
Sure.
So I think that's also an important thing to consider when you talk about Jim Nagy taking this position.
In terms of talking about marketing the Senior Bowl too, I think that, it's kind of come out, and if you hadn't known already, the draft starts here in Mobile moniker, I think that's something that Jim Nagy had kind of come up with.
He did, yeah. He
as
coined
far
it.
as, pressing it out there. And then we've seen what's happened over the last 7 years with the Senior Bowl just in general. It's become a massive, massive event and a conduit between the end of the season, getting to this point now with the Combine, and we'll get to that here in a second, with the Oklahoma Sooners up there, Danny Sussman and Ethan Downs absolutely tearing it up. There was a lot of questions in terms of kind of the pecking order with everything, because I do think that it raised some eyebrows on Wednesday when the announcement was made that Jim Nagy will be basically reporting to Randall Stevenson, who takes over as chair of football and special advisor to the president and director of athletics. Austin Sooner 24 wants to know, seems like a good hire. I'm very interested in how the front office will be structured and where the head coach fits in the pecking order. Even NFL teams aren't uniform in who actually wields the most power over roster decisions, head coach, general manager, owner, as used as an example here.
So the way that I would picture it, and we don't know this for sure. Hopefully we can talk to Jim Nagy and understand kind of the structure of this thing. But the way they phrased it makes me think it is very much just like an NFL team. You have your owners, or people that own shares in the team, and that would be the president. I think Joe C would be kind of in that category, maybe a step below.
Extent, maybe the board of regents.
The board of regents, like they're at the top. And then you have like your president of football operations, right? And that would be Randall Stevenson. He typically does, the finances, understanding the budget, how are they going to get the money to pay the players. And then you have your general manager underneath that he says, okay, I'm going to make this roster look like this, 1 through 105, right? Like this is how much we're going to pay. This is where we're going to spend our money. And typically, right, the president of football operations, the owners, they let the GM do it. They say, you are running the show. And then you have your head coach who's focused on the field performance, right? And, working closely with the GM on, hey, I really need this type of player. I need a guy at this position. I need, whatever it is to make sure that they win. And so that's how I would assume it's being structured. I don't think we know for sure, but I think the main thing to take away, there's going to be a lot of collaboration.
Sure.
Like I don't think this is a one-man show. Now, I think Jim Nagy's going to have a lot of say in terms of how much they're paying certain guys, how much they're paying certain positions, the type of players they're looking for, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. And that's not to say that I think this staff has not done a good job in terms of recruiting, but I do think they've had some misses. And I've said that, that they've missed on some guys in the transfer portal. They need to have a higher hit rate there. They need to have a higher hit rate on some of these guys in high school. And you look at, you mentioned the Combine, and we'll get to that in a second. Last 2 years, they've only had 3 guys there.
Right.
That's the only teams in the SEC that they're higher than this year in terms of players at the Combine are Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, who didn't have anybody go.
Yeah, you don't want to be a part
good.
of that group.
Yeah, you don't want to be a part of that group. So you need to, and I think that number is going to increase next year. You look at the guys that are eligible next year, I think they'll have several guys go. But I think Jim Nagy is going to be super helpful in terms of identifying talent, whether at the high school ranks or in the transfer portal, that are NFL guys.
Would you say it's fair to say that, and if you're looking at a hierarchy, Brent Venables and Jim Nagy kind of on that same level?
Yes, I would say so. I think Nagy probably has final say, but I don't know. And that's what's going to be really interesting because I do think we're going to get to talk to Nagy here in the next week or so.
Sure.
I think that's kind of the first question of like, what's the structure here? Who has final say on what? And I think that it's important to know. At the same time, I think that Nagy's just going to be able to take a lot off of Brent's plate. And that's what you're seeing in college football is these coaches don't have the time or the mental capacity to deal with everything that's going on in college athletics right now, whether it's NIL or the transfer portal window. Like, you're going to have a whole front office staff that's going to be dedicated to watching players that could maybe enter the portal, watching players that you may want to offer, right? Like, it won't just be the assistants and the head coach. And I think that allows, Brent and some of these coaches to just focus on football and then go to Nagy and say, hey, we really need a player at this spot. Can you find us one?
In knowing how important the 2025 football season is for all of these people involved, it seems like it's going to be kind of an anxious next couple of months as everything kind of formulates. And then obviously when you get into the season, it's just, I guess what I'm saying is it's going to be a while. Like, you're going to have to wait a while to see how all of this plays out. You're not getting the immediate gratification of, they're in.
And on like Nagy's perspective, I'm sure now he's going through film of this last year and evaluating players on OU's roster. But until he sees them in person, like, I'm sure he'll be at every spring practice evaluating guys and being like, is that guy worth the money that OU's paying him? And all those things
almost kind of makes spring ball that much more important. Like, could you see a situation where you come back and maybe there are a couple names that would surprise if Jim Nagy doesn't see them fitting in with 100%. What they're doing?
And that's what makes the spring portal, which I think opens April 16th. It's going to be fascinating because I do think that Nagy and whoever he hires in the next month or so could come in here and say, well, maybe we don't feel the same way about this guy. And also, hey, we got to go get this player in the spring portal. So it's going to be a fascinating, next month and a half.
April 16th, the weekend after the the spring game weekend, obviously Masters weekend as well. We need to get that changed. Not the Masters weekend. It's perfect. All right, let's move on. We'll step out of the OU athletics world. Rest in peace, Gene Hackman, the great coach from Hoosiers. Unforgiven, The Quick and the Dead, The Replacements. Do you like The Replacements, George?
Yeah, that's. I mean, for me, Hoosiers is number one with Hackman, which is an obvious one, but Replacements is a close second.
It's a little bit of a interesting mix when you're talking about Hoosiers that he only puts 4 guys out on the floor. Sometimes it feels like Porter's doing that as well. Thank you to Suitor75 for that. It is kind of weird too. Do you have any opinion on how he died?
No, it's crazy though.
It seems
kind of sad.
Oh yeah, definitely. It seems weird. There's obviously an investigation.
You're a conspiracy guy, so
I don't know. I can't decide if it's been upgraded to suspicious is what Carrie says. I think that possibly
he was 95.
He was an old guy, but with the way that.
But his wife was only 63.
Yeah, and
the dog.
Did she kill him? I don't know. Or did they really just succumb to carbon monoxide, which is like one of the scariest. Like, I don't know. You shouldn't be terrified about it, but I don't know. I feel like that's going to happen to me someday. Yeah. Or I'm just going to die.
I didn't realize he.
I don't have a garage though either.
Back to his career, I didn't realize he hadn't made a movie since like 2004.
Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
Well, he was what? You said 95.
Yeah, but a lot of actors still go all the way until their 80s. Sometimes.
Carrie's saying, "Welcome to Mooseport." I haven't seen it. Is it good? It has Ray. Carrie answers it by saying it has Ray Romano in it. You decide. I don't know. I guess Rabin was always kind of funny. He's always at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. I wonder if him and Randall Stevenson have played together. I bet they have at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Thank you to AT&T. All right, let's move back in. Let's go. We buttered you up a second to get to this point where we're going to talk a little bit of basketball, okay? Is that all right with everybody? I believe it is going to be... All right, we'll switch it up. We'll butter you up a little bit more here with maybe some good news, maybe some bad news. We'll see how you take it here. As a little bit more Jim Nagy talk. This was to Carrie Murdoch on the Cryptic Corner. Is there a world where Nagy is being groomed as Joe's replacement? I'll take this as amazing news for now, but I'll always dream be a dream bigger guy. We like that, not young, not olds. What do you say to that, George?
No, that's not happening. I don't think Jim Nagy wants to be an athletic director.
Sure, he wants to be here for football.
I also think that this hire actually signals that Joe Castiglione's not going anywhere. I think that's kind of what this says, or at least has no intention to.
Sure.
But I think Jim Nagy wants to be a general manager, and I think that the more likely scenario is that this is Jim Nagy trying to get his way to be an NFL GM someday. Because if he does a really good job at OU over the next few years, NFL teams are going to come knocking. And so I think that it's more likely that than I don't think Jim Nagy wants any part of being an athletic director.
The good news is, and as we talked about on the pod and the instant reaction and everywhere else that we've talked about this since then, if that were to happen, great news, because that means that you've done something.
Yeah. If Jim Nagy were to get an NFL GM job in the next 2 or 3 years, that means that OU football probably won a lot of football games.
Sure.
So I don't think that would be necessarily a bad thing. And look, he's going to hire out an entire front office. You would assume he's going to hire somebody that could maybe fill that position or get hired away at another school for that same position. So I wouldn't worry about that just yet. But the idea of him, becoming the athletic director, I don't think that's even a thought.
It will be interesting to see, when we talk to him, what his vision is for this front office, because I think that we have a decent idea of what it could look like and how it's structured, just based off National Football League teams. But at the same time, it's going to be a little bit different. I don't think it'll be as big as some of those. We were looking at the Philadelphia Eagles front office, and you're talking about 40, 50 people. I don't think it's going to be anywhere near that.
No, but it could be maybe 10.
Yeah,
which would be huge. I don't know that for sure. I'm just throwing that number out there. It certainly isn't going to be 50, like you said, but he's going to have an assistant GM. He's going to have scouts that are just for high school, scouts that are just for the transfer portal. So it's going to be a pretty big undertaking.
We were talking to Josh about that on the instant reaction, or I think it was on the unofficial 40 on Wednesday. It's just kind of mind blowing to think of going to a high school game on Friday night, and you have. Maybe someday in the future you have scouts from Penn State, Oklahoma, Florida State, and they're all just writing everything down like it's a combine or something.
Yeah, it'd be
crazy.
Awesome.
And
I think that's what we're going toward.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No, not if you're going to have all this money being used. Like, you need to have those type of people.
We're talking about a $1 billion industry when we're talking about the world of college football specifically.
I mean, it's minor league NFL right now.
Sure.
So you have to model it after the major leagues, which is the NFL.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fascinating. It is a rather interesting time for, college football, obviously, but it just seems like college athletics as a whole over the next couple of years is going to be a little bit different. All right, let's do it. Porter Moser. I'm not a fan of Porter as a coach, but the players have to execute. The defensive IQ is low. Fears once again drives into an impossible situation instead of looking for a legit opportunity by a teammate. Owe was incredible tonight. Speaking of Otega Owe, who dropped 28 on Oklahoma, scoring the final 18 in the final 8 minutes of the game on Wednesday night. There are some nice players in the backcourt, but as I look at the conference, it's the weaknesses that get exploited nearly every game. They are a terrible defensive team, and the Bigs aren't good enough. They fought hard, but this was a pivotal game, and as is the case on most nights in conference play, Porter's teams fall short over and over. That from the half yard and ditto. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing he said was wrong.
No, I don't think anything he said was wrong. And that's the frustrating part is, like, I think that obviously they could use a big guy and they could use, a couple, if you could have held on to Otega Owe and gotten Brandon Garrison in the portal, like, how good could this team be? And
that's what made Wednesday night sting even more. The fact that Otega was here last year. You recruited Brandon Garrison. He plays 27 minutes.
And they were the two best players on the court.
Yeah.
They were
for
the difference
Kentucky, by the way. I kept turning to Josh Calloway and saying, Otega's like the best player for Kentucky right now.
It's insane. And that's the frustrating part. But at the same time, it's like, bless his heart, the Greg, OU Hoops fan, Greg, I don't know if
our guy's been going through it.
Follow him on X, but he put out just a wild video this morning. It was like 5.5 minutes long of just like the most heartbreaking losses of the Porter Moser era. And there's just so many of them. It's like, at some point, is it like it's a trend in terms of under Porter's direction, they tend to lose these really close games, and especially games that are like, if you win this, you're going to get into the NCAA tournament. And it's kind of like that. You mentioned it. It's just like the Houston game a year ago. And I get it. Houston was a phenomenal basketball team a year ago. OU should not have been in that game, but they were, and they had a chance to win it, and they couldn't do it. And just like Kentucky, I don't even think Kentucky's on Houston's level. That was a game OU should have won. They had it, right? And they weren't able to close it out. And it's just like the LSU game, another one that's like, that's not even comparable to Houston, but you win the LSU game, you're maybe in the NCAA tournament for sure right now, and that's the hard part to swallow.
There's a lot of these games, and as you said, OU Hoops fan Greg on Twitter, go check out the video if you want to be a real sicko about it. Because, and the crazy thing is, not only are you in a lot of those games, and say you just win half of them, and a couple of them were up at Allen Fieldhouse from the last couple of years, it's incredible to me, like just how much different this narrative would be had you won a couple of these. And I think the thing that like really hit home on that video that OU fans Greg made, a lot of them were at home. Yep. And when you're talking about a fan base, and we saw all the comments coming out of Wednesday night, traveled down from Tulsa for all these games, and you have to make the drive home for an hour and a half thinking about what could have been because Oklahoma can't close any of these games out.
Yeah.
It's incredible to me. It's almost like, it's kind of like what you said, like, yeah, there's luck that goes into it, and there's some fantastic shots that are made, like the Houston game, like even the Baylor game, the Texas Tech game last year. But at the same time, you're putting yourself in these spots, and there's a lot of stuff that adds up in the first, 35 minutes of a game that lead to that point. And why can you not get over the hump? That's been a frustrating experience.
And it's you just win one more game, and you find a way in each of those seasons, and you're probably in the NCAA tournament every year under Porter Moser, and that's the hard part.
Maybe not
his
first year, but yeah,
all the other years
they're
sure. One game away.
Sure.
And that's the hard part. It's like you're one game away, and everybody's like, man, they're so close, but it's like, how can they not, get that? And that's what we're going to find out these next 3 games, right? Because I still think they have a chance to make it. And if they can go win, I don't know, maybe one of these final 3, they might get in. If they win 2, I think they're definitely in the NCAA tournament. So
you would feel good about them going, if they could win 2 or 3, you'd feel good about it going into Nashville.
And these are winnable games. I think all 3 are winnable games.
The frustrating thing is I think that you left there on Wednesday night saying, if they play like that over the next 3 games, you can win all 3 of them. You can go 3-0, and all of a sudden you wouldn't have to worry about being on a bubble. Yeah. Joe Lunardi has Oklahoma still in the tournament on Friday morning, which is bonkers considering where this thing's at. They've won 4 conference games, but at the same time, you see what Michigan was able to do, come back, hit a big shot against Rutgers on Thursday night. Arizona has a big game coming up this weekend. Not to say that it's going to hurt or help Oklahoma, but they're good basketball teams. Louisville's a good basketball team, and it's a frustrating experience watching this basketball team right now because it seems like they are so close. But at the end of the day, if you don't make the NCAA tournament for the 4th consecutive year, it's historically bad. It's first time in 60 years.
Go watch the women's team, though. They're kicking ass.
They got a big game on Sunday,
they
right?
Do.
Alabama.
Big final game.
Real quick, we talked about this on the Hoops Report. They can clinch the 5 seed with a win.
I don't think they can get to the 4 because Kentucky ended up beating Tennessee last night, which they whooped them. But I think it's the 5. If they win on Sunday, they will be the 5 seed. They could drop all the way to, I think, the 7th seed if they were to lose. I think they probably end up at 6th. They're tied right now with Alabama and Ole Miss, and they beat Ole Miss, so they have the tiebreaker over them. But yeah, big game. I mean, and Alabama's coming off of a big win over LSU on Thursday.
Should be fun. The women's tournament, obviously, that's the final regular season game on Sunday. The SEC women's tournament starting next week. We're getting to the, obviously the first week of March where all these conference tournaments start taking place. One of my favorite times of the year.
It's the best.
For college basketball, maybe just in general. Last time Oklahoma, I believe, was in an NCAA tournament. They were in Indianapolis. There's a number of Sooners in Indianapolis this week for the NFL Combine. Danny Stutzman was phenomenal yesterday. Ethan Downs was phenomenal. A lot of draft sites were expecting Stutz to be in the 4.8 range. That 4.52 was huge for him. He definitely probably goes in round 2 now with that time 62 sack monster, putting that out in the Combine thread, which has been very active because of Ethan Downs and Danny Stutzman's performances on Wednesday.
I think both of them,
or Thursday,
both of them improved their stock. I think that Ethan, especially, because Ethan kind of came into this as, I thought he was going to get drafted, but a lot of people said, he might be an undrafted guy. I think he solidified his chance of being drafted with the way that he performed. I mean, his 40 time was great, but then he gets 32 on the bench press, the most of any defensive end since I think 2019.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it just
good for him.
Huge number. And then even some of his other stuff, his 3-cone wasn't great, his 20-yard shuttle wasn't great, which isn't surprising, but some of his 10-yard split was awesome. And then I saw even some analysts raving about how he looked in drills. So I think he's certainly somebody, and I can only imagine Ethan nailed the interview process.
Yeah.
Like going and talking to teams, that he is certainly somebody teams are going to want in their locker room. So he did great. And then Danny, I think we all thought Danny would test well. I didn't think he'd run the 3rd fastest time of inside linebackers. I mean, he matched Jahad Campbell, who's supposed to be the number 1 linebacker, going to go in the first round out of Alabama, and he ran the same time as him. And looked great, and had I think some of his numbers. He had a decent vertical. I don't think he did the broad jump, but his other times were fantastic. So and then you turn on the tape with Danny, and it's incredible. His job as a tackler. Yeah,
that shows up.
He might be the best tackler in the draft this year.
376 career tackles. Yeah. Obviously broke into the top 10 for Oklahoma all time to end his career. So. It was cool. I was happy for those guys, and we'll see how Billy Bowman does.
He's running right now. I've been checking my watch is buzzing off the chain, so I think he may have just ran his 40. So we'll see what he ended up running in his 40. But I would anticipate somewhere on the 4.4 something. I mean, I know somebody said they thought he could run a 4.3, but that would be impressive. I know too. I have actually had a couple people text me that are down at the combine and ask me about Billy Bowman. And I think there's a lot of teams that are going to fall in love with him. If he has a good pro day and a good combine, which I don't know if he'll do pro day, but I could see him easily being a day 2 guy, which right now I think he's kind of considered like a 4th rounder.
Sure.
I could see him jumping into round 3.
And talking about Billy, I think that like one of my favorite plays of the year was the play on the 4th and 1 up in Columbia.
Yeah, I know. Which people will forget. People will because they lost the game, but that was an amazing play.
It was unbelievable. It was a big play in the moment too, coming up with the 4th down stop. Do you agree though, Danny, day 2?
Yeah. I think he's definitely a day 2.
Second
and I think
round?
Maybe if a team falls in love with him.
Sure.
Just hard. Inside linebacker, they usually don't get taken very high. And this inside linebacker group is a pretty good group. There's a lot of guys that don't have the production of Danny, but have really high upside. So I think that there could be a couple guys go before him. I think a few people have him somewhere in like their 4th or 5th best linebacker. I think he's probably more like top 3. So we'll see.
It's kind of, as we always say too, it's like, I think selection and where you end up going is super, super important. It'd be awesome if he could go to somewhere and just be a contender. Like, send Danny to the Detroit Lions, him and Danny.
Well, and he'll be great on teams will fall in love with him too because he can play special teams. Yeah. You can put him on kickoff return, and he'll do really well there.
Billy Bowman obviously had
Billy Bowman too.
A big Senior Bowl practice down in Mobile.
Yeah.
Selection of Jim Nagy. So, all right, let's close it out. There has been a situation in Norman. We have lost a institution, and I say that somewhat jokingly. This threat involved Kerry Murdoch. It has been. See, we're talking about on the border in Oklahoma City. It is no longer over there on, kind of on the expressway, just on the, I guess that'd be west side of Hefner Parkway. Do you ever have the pleasures?
Oh yeah, there's an on the border in Tulsa, right across the street from Bishop Kelly.
Okay,
and we used to eat.
In fact,
there
I think Carrie and I have gone to that one before.
Yeah, I liked on the border. I haven't had it in years though. I'm much more of a Senor Tequila guy. Chimmy's in Tulsa, which is just okay, but it's kind of like you guys just got to go.
Is Ted's just an Oklahoma City thing?
I think so.
They didn't have one in
not
in
that
Tulsa,
I know of, but
they have ponchos up there where they raise the flag.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I've never been.
That
to
was
ponchos.
a place on. That was a riot. That was a place on. I think it was on Northwest Expressway. Growing up at Oklahoma City,
Senor Tequila's was the place that we went.
2 of Kerry Murdoch's guilty pleasures. I've been to both. Taco Tico, we've made those trips through Kansas before, and then El Phoenix down in Dallas. They're good. They're good.
I haven't been to either one.
I didn't like Taco Tico the first time, but you kind of fall in love with it the more you go.
Is Taco Tico like a fast food type place?
It's like take a Taco Bell. I'm worried somebody's going to come running in here. It's like a Taco Bell minus like 1,000, but it's still good.
Oh, I don't know.
Is that fair, Carrie?
I don't really like Taco Bell.
I'm not getting paid anymore. I'm going to have to start prostituting. All right, that's going to do it. That was a good around the quarter. A lot of questions about some truly important stuff here in Norman.
It was a busy news week this week.
It was, and it's going to be even busier next week with the start of spring ball. Just real quick before we get out of here, what's like one thing from spring ball that you want, not necessarily that you're looking for, but you want to walk away from the spring game or whatever when they end and go, I feel better about this?
Oh, boy. I think the easy answer is like, John Mateer in the offense. But I feel like we're not going to really know much from that in the spring. I want to feel good about the offensive line. Yeah. And I feel like we've talked about, they got all these guys coming back. They added 2 guys who are starters next year. I want to see it kind of come together. I want to hear about Eddie Pierre-Louis stealing someone's job. I want to hear about Hito Zaida taking another step. I know Logan Howland, it doesn't sound like he'll be much a part of spring, but Jake Taylor, Jacob Sexton,
because of a shoulder surgery,
right? He had shoulder surgery, but I want to hear about this offensive line. Because people forget, maybe people don't forget, but last spring we heard about how bad they were. Yeah. Remember, we heard all spring was the offense can't even run anything because the offensive line is so bad. I want to come out of spring camp and say, hey, man, the offensive line's really coming together. Some of these young guys, maybe a Michael Fasusi, maybe a Ryan Foje, are helping out. Whatever it is, I want to come out and say they feel pretty good about their offensive line.
You mentioned Logan Howland and his injury situation. It's going to be interesting to see some of the guys that were banged up throughout 2024 this past season. What's Jaden Gibson's status been?
Yeah.
How's the rehab coming along with the patellar tendon? And I'm sure that there's a number of these guys that are going to come up and, maybe they're limited or not even working out during the spring. It's just going to be interesting to see who those guys are. And for as bad as Oklahoma, had the injury bug last year, just get out of spring healthy.
Yeah. Well, and last year, Troy Everett went down.
Sure.
And that was huge.
That was massive.
That was a huge deal. So you would definitely want to stay healthy. Jaden Gibson, I bet he's not a full go guy. I bet he's limited. Maybe he's out there running some routes and stuff, but I would highly doubt he's a full participant. The other one to watch, Jaden Jackson, who also had surgery after the season, I think on his shoulder as well. So we'll see if he's out there, but I doubt it. There's no reason to push those guys.
No doubt. All right, that's going to do it for this week's Around the Corner. All of our questions coming from the Crimson Corner on SoonerScoop.com. $1. Great time to join as we were talking about Jim Nagy stuff, as well as next week with everything that comes with spring football and all the diamond sports. Maybe
meet some
basketball.
of the newcomers next week. So
I'm excited about that. Excited to talk to John Mateer. I mean, obviously we saw him on Wednesday night at the basketball game. They brought all the newcomers out. I will say, the kid from Western Carolina, the offensive lineman.
Oh, Derek Simmons. Big dude.
He's a massive dude, and he looks like he's about 45 years old.
Yeah,
and I say that as nice as possible, but an intimidating figure nonetheless. For George Stoia, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.